As you can see on the screen, today is 24th of February, 2022. While it may have gone into history like a regular day, an ordinary day, in fact, it will remain as a date when the Russians invaded Ukraine. We'll see how the story unfolds in the following days, weeks. And we hope that tonight, or whenever you will watch this video, you'll find an anchor, not in the breaking news, not in those stories that today are the narrative and tomorrow are just rubbish in a recycle bin, but instead you'll find the anchor of the Bible prophecy. As you know, we are studying the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation from the Holy Scriptures. And we are covering step by step different chapters in the book of Daniel. You remember we've already spoken about Daniel being a captive going to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, the mighty king, having a dream, Daniel interpreting the dream. Then the story in Daniel 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, each one of them has been presented here. And you remember Daniel told the king that the revealer of mysteries, which is God, showed you, king, what is going to happen. In other words, the prophecies are like going behind the curtain, seeing what is behind those top secret files in order to get ready, to be prepared for what is to come. And now in Daniel chapter 7, it is not the king who has a dream, but it is Daniel himself. And he says that in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter, or the substance, the essence of it. And I highlighted this one because usually in a dream there may be different details, but Daniel makes or takes the essence of all this dream and then writes it down. So then anything and everything that is written there will really have a significance. We say, welcome to the Bible prophecy, also because from Daniel 7, we really have prophecies. Chapters from 1 to 6 in Daniel were more of a historical nature. There were events, there were situations that later on will be projected in the stories, in the prophetic stories in chapter 7, 8, 9, and so on. And verse 2 says, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. You can already see two plans here, two layers. I highlighted them in different colors. There is the heaven and there is the earth, or anything that happens on the earth. On the map, you see what was known in that time as the Great Sea, is the Mediterranean Sea. You can easily see that it's a key place in the world, in the old world. You have three continents bordering it. Where you see on the top right corner, where you see being written Europe, that is where Ukraine is. In this context, in this territory of the Great Sea, most of the biblical prophecies, most of the events presented in the biblical prophecies really take place. When you read even the letters in the New Testament, or the kingdoms that were described in Daniel 2, and many other things in the biblical history really happened here. And Daniel sees winds of heaven. For those of you who have read other parts of the biblical prophecies, like in the book of Ezekiel or Matthew or Revelation, you will notice that the winds are usually symbols of conflicts, symbols of troubles coming to people. So somehow what Daniel sees here, it's a turmoil starting to take place. Where? In this area around the Great Sea. And he says that 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. When it says 4 great beasts, we understand there were 4 very easily, right? But it's great. They are not just regular beasts, and they are different from one another. In other words, it's not a pack of wolves, let's say, or a flock of whatever other beasts, but instead they are 4 creatures, 4 different creatures, each one of them great. In other words, each one of them has some significance. It's important, and we need to spotlight each one of them. You remember, Daniel said, I wrote the sum of the matter. So if he says 4, we get it. If he says great beasts, it means that whatever lion was there or bear was there, they were not just regular animals or regular beasts. And when it says again, different from one another, then we do not expect just a simple repetition, but each one of them will have different features, different symbols. So let's read. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. None of us has ever seen a lion with wings. We know this comes from stories, from fairy tales, from legends, from myths. And you can go to the British Museum and you'll see this kind of beasts there in stone. It was a mixture, like the sphinxes, a mixture of different animals taking the best features of all. So you can see here when it says lion and eagle's wings, you can understand this is a symbol of the king, and even a higher king than the usual king of the jungle. It's also somebody that has rulership over higher grounds, like the vulture. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. Can you see? It's a process, kind of conversion, not necessarily downgrading, but also improving. Is downgrading from the idea of force and skills, like an eagle's wings or lion, but it's also going to a man, which has no much power in facing a lion, let's say, but it's also a kind of conversion, transformation from a beast to a man, from a ferocious beast to a man who has understanding. I'm just giving you one example here because it was mentioned on a previous occasion. Can you imagine Nebuchadnezzar, who was a king, then became a beast, and then got converted again, got transformed again, being brought back to his senses, to his minds, standing on 2 feet and becoming the king again. And when I read about this lion being so powerful, having wings, it's like a super force, superpower, but then having the wings plucked off and then lifted up from the ground and made to stand like a man. I really feel like it's that story of Nebuchadnezzar in here. Let's go to the second beast that is being observed by or noticed by Daniel. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth, between its teeth, and it was told, "Rise, devour much flesh." Once again, it's another beast, ferocious beast. It's not a vegetarian beast. It stands on one side, which means there is kind of a imbalance of power in there. It has 3 ribs, most probably coming from his prey, whether it was one prey or 3 targets. And this beast also gets the power or the dominion, saying, "Arise and devour much flesh." Obviously, there is nothing fancy here, but it's all very violent. Beast number 3. After this, I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, just easily comparing the beast number 1 with beast number 3, we can see one was lion, this one is leopard. One was the king of the jungle, let's say, but this one has the symbol of swiftness, and it doesn't only have the speed of a leopard, but it has wings, and it doesn't have 2 wings as the lion had, but it has 4, which means there is a different power here. There is a different symbol representing something which is very fast, very powerful on both grounds, on the soil, let's say on the ground floor, but also in the air. And what is interesting this time is that it has 4 heads. Now we know when in nature somebody, whether it's a small animal or even humans, you have 2 or with their heads joined, or that's not normal. There is something strange in there. There is a genetic issue in there. So when we read about this beast having 4 heads, you realize either that it's 4 times wiser or 4 times more having coverage all over, or it's split in 4, each head having its own territory. Also for this one, it says dominion was given to it. Each of these beasts conquers something, invades, if we are to speak with the words in currency today. Each one of these conquers more or covers more and more territory. I hope that you can feel already these are words regarding kingdoms, regarding empires, regarding at least armies. Then comes beast number 4. This one, I'll say it from the start, this one has no name. It doesn't say whether it's a lion or leopard or bear or something else. Now the artist illustrated it like a dinosaur or some kind of a dragon. Daniel says, after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. You can see that we have no wings here. This beast doesn't have 2 or 3 heads. It's just terrifying. It's just dreadful and exceedingly strong. What is strange here is that it has iron teeth. In other words, it can just bite, chew, destroy anything. And it even says it devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It is like a tank going, crushing everything. What is interesting about this one, Daniel says, it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. The lion didn't have any horns, nor the bear, nor the leopard. But this one has 10 horns. And that makes it different. It just doesn't need wings to fly. It just doesn't need anything else like a swiftness to run, to cover, to take dominion right away. It just has power. And with these horns, it's like a crown. And little by little, I'm drawing here the one time and time again, this idea of kingdom, of an empire. These are symbols of, I would say an animal here, but they are symbols of dominion. And even Daniel says, I considered the horns. You know, immediately his eyes go to check for these horns. And behold, he says, there came up among them another horn, the 11th, we would call it, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking great things. This is interesting because it means that such a beast is not just a creature. It's not just the drawing or the imagination of a Walt Disney illustrator somewhere, but it means that there is something human. There is a human element in it. It has eyes like the eyes of a man. It has a mouth speaking great things. What are these great things? Let's move on then with Daniel. Just as a short review, we can see why Daniel was so interested or observed these horns. Seeing a lion with wings, it was obvious. It was something so common for Daniel in Babylon. Once again, you can go to the British Museum and you will see there these illustrations, huge in stone. It was a common symbol there. The bear, the leopard, they are quite normal animals in a way. Of course, they have some special features, but nothing so strange. While this beast, the 4th one, has a horn which comes to speak great things. Now, when I read here about great things, I imagine again that King Nebuchadnezzar, who said to the 3 young Hebrew guys, said, who is that God that can snatch you or take you out of my hand? You know, he felt like he was the king. He was the super king of the universe. I imagine that such a little horn, which will become great horn, is saying this kind of great things. Daniel is so interested now to know what are these beasts, what's the symbol. And somewhere in verse 17, this is a spoiler now. We have not yet reached verse 17, but I'm just bringing it now so we understand what's the essence. He told me, the interpreter for Daniel, and made known to me the interpretation of the things. What's that? It's once again, it's not my idea. It is right there in verse 17. You should highlight that verse, because if anyone asks you, what's the story in Daniel 7? And even what's the story in the entire book of Daniel, you will have to know this verse. And you can highlight it and point it out. These four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. These are not aliens. These are four empires who will rise one after another on our planet, around the Great Sea. Four beasts equals four kings or four kingdoms. May I connect now Daniel 2 and Daniel 7? Because it's such a order of things which I hardly see it as a coincidence. Just bear with me and you'll see it immediately. In Daniel 2, the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar. In Babylon, you would see lions, winged lions all over. What if the arms of silver are now being represented here by the bear? What if it's the same story? Why I'm saying this? Because the angel gives the interpretation saying four kingdoms, four beasts. But it was 50 years later from that dream of Daniel 2, where the king also dreamt about empires following one after another. And what if the leopard is the symbol now of the belly of brass? And you remember the fourth kingdom was of iron. And this beast has teeth of iron. And it crushes everything. And you remember the fifth part was not a fifth kingdom, but was the fourth one being transformed. The legs of iron ended with the feet of iron and clay, a mixture. And now here we have not a fifth beast, but a feature on the fourth beast. Maybe for some of you it will be the first time you see this combination, but let me help you seeing it in a form of a table here. You remember the head of gold, followed by the arms of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. And once again, and the last one was the stone. But I want to highlight one thing here. The fourth kingdom takes also the fifth position, but in a transformed way. There is not a fifth metal in the feet. Let's say diamond or aluminum or anything, any precious stone or metal or anything else. But it's something from number 4 transformed or mixed with something else. We covered that in Daniel 2. Head of gold was Babylon. Arms of silver was Medo-Persia. Belly of bronze was Greece. Legs of iron, Rome. Feet of iron and clay, we said it was Rome transformed. And then the stone, kingdom of Christ. This, once again, was covered in Daniel 2. Let me bring now on the third column, the symbols here. Is the same story, the same 4 kingdoms. And once again, this is not my interpretation. This was given by an angel to Daniel. And Daniel wrote the sum of the matter. And we have the lion being converted. That's why I said it looks to me like the story of Nebuchadnezzar. We have the bear on a side, and you remember Medo-Persia, and one part of the empire was stronger than the other, and the weaker one became more powerful than the other. The winged leopard, it's a fitting symbol for Greece, which conquered the entire known world at that time in a very, very rapid manner. The strange beast, it's Rome. What's the fifth element? The fifth element, as I said, is not something new, but it's a transformation. It's a feature of the number 4, transformed, edited in a different shape. And that is the little horn, which becomes big little horn. Please have in mind this one, this picture. If needed, please review this presentation later on YouTube, on our channel. This is a story being repeated, and you'll find it later in chapter 8 and later in chapters from 10 to 12. But now something happens in the storyline. You remember, Daniel saw the winds of heaven and being stirred up on the great sea, and then he saw the 4 beasts. This is all on the human level, on the human ground. But there is something else happening now. Verse 9 and 10. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. You can see that suddenly the entire image or the spotlights are somewhere up to heaven. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, that's million. And 10,000 times 10,000, that's even more, stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were open. I'll highlight a few things here, hoping that you'll understand the setting. This is just an illustration of an artist, how he saw it. The Ancient of the Days, encircled by light, glory, fire, and then some books being opened. So let's review the text. When it says here, thrones were placed, and when it says here that the Ancient of Days took his seat, don't you feel that setting of a court setting, where one voice will say, all rise, and the judge comes in, everybody takes his or her place. Even more, there are thousands serving him, providing all the documents, all the information needed. And there are many who stood before there. There are witnesses. There are onlookers. There are entities interested in the outcome of what is going to happen. What? The court sat in judgment. How is this judgment being done? By the books. So please have in mind this two-tier or two-layer kind of setting. What Daniel saw in the first 8 verses was what happened around the Great Sea. It's like what we are reading today in the news. But now his vision is taken upwards, and he sees what happens in heaven. So while here on the earth, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, guess what's happening in heaven? A judgment. A judgment even of the guys who are writing history in our days. You remember Daniel was left looking at this strange feature of the beast, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and the mouth speaking great things. with whom or with what you compare something to say, this is a great thing. Well, the storyline itself brings in the reality of heaven. And I kind of feel that what this little horn speaks is not against a man, against a country, against the law, against the value, but it's against God. How do I know? Because later on in verse 11, Daniel says, I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. Can you please see here that whatever this little horn speaks, whatever it wants to say, I am somebody or I'm doing something, it is against God. Because the outcome of the judgment, when this little horn or the beast is being judged, the outcome is sentence to kill, to death. Who is this power? What great things does it say? Why is it destroyed? Let's read on. I left you with this picture, but with the last cell of the table empty. What was to follow? Just putting again in parallel the two stories in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we are looking now for item number 6. We have 3 kingdoms, then a 4th one covering 2 different layers, but then the 6th element was the stone, was the kingdom of Christ as we described then. So let's see it now. This is what Daniel sees next. Again, it's an illustration, but let's read for ourselves the text. I saw, it's verses 13 and 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. You see, there are no beasts, no horns, no wings, no blood, nothing like this. It's one like the Son of Man. And to him was given dominion and glory and the kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. You remember the stone? I highlighted in different colors 4 features. 1, it will, with red, it will never be destroyed. With blue, it will never be given to another one coming later. It will crush with orange. It will crush everything that was before. And with green, it will endure forever. Let me put on the screen now, in parallel, once again, Daniel 7 and Daniel 2. Look what we've just read in Daniel 7. With red, the kingdom of the Son of Man will not be destroyed. With orange, it shall not pass away. There will be no other kingdom coming later. With blue, all peoples, kingdom, nations, languages, all should serve him. And with green, this is going to be an everlasting dominion. Please, ladies and gentlemen, spend more time reading these prophecies and highlight for yourself, draw for yourself the parallels, the connections between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. It is a repetition of history with more symbols, greater insight, more in depth, and you'll see immediately with details that really affect myself and you and the world around us. And we start now to see that it's not only a history of empires, but we get into the great controversy. We get into those moments or those times where things happening on the earth affect the human destiny forever, where man trample divine presence. Let's see. Daniel himself is shocked. He says in verses from 15 to 18, as for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he, one of those, you remember those thousands and thousands? So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. Once again, what I'm saying tonight is not my interpretation. It's there. So this, whether it was an angel or some other creature in heaven, said to him, these four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. And now we get into the great controversy. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. You see, for the first time, we have here the word saints. We've read about Daniel, about his three friends. We somehow perceive them as saints, but now their own story becomes a integral part of what we read here. And it's not only their story, it's the story of the saints of the Most High, whether it was Abel, whether it was Daniel, whether it was Stephen, Paul, or me and you today. So we can see the four beasts are four kingdoms, but there is another kind of kingdom coming in, which is made up by the saints of the Most High. And the great controversy is not between USA and Russia, between China and this, between whatever nations will fight, whether in Ukraine, in Syria, in Angola, or anywhere. But it is a great controversy between good and evil, between Satan and the kingdom of Christ. So Daniel wants to know more. He's not interested in the lion. He has lived all his life in Babylon, and then some years also in Medo-Persia. He's not interested in those kingdoms. He's not interested in Greece because it's just another beast. But he's more interested in the last one, the one who will go all the way to the end. So he says, verse 19 and 20, then I desired to know the truth. You remember, we are discovered truth. We are inviting you also to know the truth, to discover it, to search for yourself. So Daniel himself said, I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And also about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. The horn that had eyes and mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. Verses 21 and 22 in 3 layers explain the entire things. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them. Forever? No. Until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. I highlighted 2 words in each of the paragraphs. There is a war with the saints, there is a judgment for the saints, and there is a kingdom for the saints. Please, the great controversy is not about some territories, about some human powers, but it's a war that Satan, through human powers, does or wages against the saints. I hope yourself and myself will see ourselves there, being the saints and not the beasts. The picture on the right usually illustrates the first Christian or the first century Christians being victims, and the second century and later being victims of the Roman Empire. But what happened when Christianity became the official power, the official religion? What happened when the Christians became the cardinals and they became also the counselors of the kings? I'm not talking now about a specific church. You can say, oh, it's Roman Catholic Church, or it's the Greek Russian or the Greek Orthodox Church, or it's the Anglican Church. What happened when the church had the power over anyone else? Let's read. The interpretation that Daniel receives is this: as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones and shall put down 3 kings. You can see there is a struggle. There are different powers fighting. But then comes again the story of the saints. He, this horn, shall speak words against the Most High, shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. And they, the saints, shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. I know the lesson explains very well these things. You should spend some time reading the lesson on our portal. But I'll highlight only one thing from the lesson here. First, it's very simple. If you want to read this entire story of who made war with the saints of the Most High, please read the book Great Controversy. If you don't have it, send us an email. We'll send it to you for free. You can also download it for free from our website, discovertruth.ie. But the lesson says something more. There is a quote, not from a religious book. It's a quote from Newsweek, an edition of 1999. A special issue discussing the Christianity from holy wars, like Inquisition and holy wars, crusades, to helping hands, to community services and other things that Christianity did for the good of the world. And there's a dash and then how Christianity shaped the modern world. So let's read it. Once again, this is not a biblical or a religious publication. Although the New Testament contains no outline for a Christian society, medieval Christianity was one long effort to establish a Christian society. The doctrine the church preached became the doctrine the king enforced. Can you see the church and the state here? Even Augustine had reluctantly concluded that the secular arm of society could be used to crush heresy. Once again, it's a secular arm of society, and then you have heresy that's sanctioned by the church. Acting on the premise that error has no rights, the church created the Inquisition, dispatching traveling squads of Franciscans and Dominicans to ferret out heretics. In 1252, Pope Innocent IV allowed suspects to be tortured. The guilty were imprisoned and sometimes put to death. Altogether, the Inquisition remains a monument to religious intolerance and a reminder of what can happen when church and state share total authority. Once again, you find this quote and the others in the lesson. You remember Daniel chapter 3? When the three young guys, Hebrew guys, were forced to worship. And when the king, the power, the secular power, had also religious power. And when they refused, we said at that time, it was also from the lesson, that Nebuchadnezzar was using political authority to enforce a certain kind of worship. In later chapters, we said of Daniel and the book of Revelation, we will see how this combination of church and state is pictured in prophecy. Guess what? We've just done it in Daniel 7 tonight. It's part of a counterfeit religious system that will rear its ugly head again and oppress God's people. We are not talking about a specific country, specific power. We are not talking about a specific church, but we talk about a system, a combination where it may be anywhere in the world. It may be everywhere in the world, where church and state make such a counterfeit religious system. Please don't forget, there are two layers of reality. We may spend hours, days, weeks just reading the breaking news. But don't forget, there is a higher reality. What Putin does today, what Biden or Johnson or anyone, any leader in the world, what they do today, it may seem to them like they're writing history, but it's just the four winds of heaven bringing turmoil around the great sea. But let's not forget, there is a higher ground. There is a judgment that happens even now, even for this or that president, for this or that general, for this or that soldier who obeys some orders. That's why verse 26, and we are getting there, verse 26 in Daniel says, but the court shall sit in judgment. And his dominion, the dominion of the little horn, shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. A short review, whether you call it the head of gold or the lion, this is Babylon. Arms of silver or bear is the Medo-Persia. The third kingdom, belly of bronze, or the symbol of leopard, it's Greece. The fourth one covers two stages. First, it's like a legs of iron and a beast with 10 horns, that is Rome. But then the iron becomes iron and clay. And the horns make room for one little horn who becomes greater than all the other. And that is Rome, the Roman Empire, transformed later in the Roman Church. That as a fourth and fifth kingdom. But the story doesn't end here. The story ends with a positive note. We will not be ruled by Putin, by Biden, by anyone, by Hitler, we mentioned, by any dictator that might come later in the future. But the Bible says the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Guess how the book of Daniel ends? Verse 28, chapter 7, how it ends. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart, in my mind. He continually thought about these things. I'm inviting you, ladies and gentlemen, to think about these things, to reread them, to study in depth, and to find your own place in the biblical prophecy. Thank you very much.